On the screen is a view of the wonderful galaxy NGC 5128 or Centaurus A. It's a galaxy that's not visible from UK latitudes, but it's very nicely placed from countries like Chile and Australia. It's actually a collision of two and even possibly three galaxies. In the background is an elliptical galaxy, and in the foreground, looking quite disturbed, is what's thought to be a spiral galaxy that's interacting with the elliptical galaxy. And whilst there's very few collisions of stars during these interactions, gas and dust, particularly in the spiral galaxy, has been kind of stirred up and should go on to produce quite intense bursts of star formation. It's also possible there's a third galaxy in there as well. Now this is a view that was taken with the Chile 2 telescope under bright moonlight conditions. So as I zoom out, you'll see that there are problems with the image with these light pollution gradients. Natural light pollution, of course, just from the moon. And we can use Photoshop to apply some quick fixes to attempt to deal with this. One of the best tools for dealing with light pollution and moonlight gradients is Gradient Xterminator, and this is available as a plugin for Photoshop. Now, to start using the tool, the first thing we have to do is draw a selection around the galaxy. So we come up to Photoshop's selection tool and draw a rough freehand selection around the galaxy. Something like that should be fine. Now at the moment, with the marching ants on the screen, this selection effect is often known as marching ants. If we did any corrections to the image, it would only apply within this selection. But what we actually want to do is apply corrections to the background sky, where the light pollution is the worst. So we have to actually invert the selection, and we can do that quite easily just by clicking within the existing selection and click on Select Inverse. Now what's happened is the part of the image that is active is this part here. Any changes we've made to this won't affect the galaxy very much. I often find that the marching ants are a little bit distracting, so what I tend to do is just use the keyboard command Control H for hide, and that gets rid of the selection on the screen. The selection itself is still active, but we can't see it. It's hidden from us, and this makes assessing the Gradient Xterminator process a little bit easier. So to actually apply it, we come up to the filter option and come right the way down to RC Astro and go across to Gradient Xterminator, and it opens up this simple menu. Now the first settings we use are under Detail we select Medium, and under Aggressiveness we select Low. An important consideration is that this box is always ticked Balance Background Colour. And once these simple settings have been selected, we click on OK. It takes a short while to process the image. The first thing we're going to do is actually deselect the image, so I'm just going to use Control D, and the image is now deselected. So what's happened is that the worst of the light pollution on this side of the gradient, the reddish tones that we saw in the image, have been reduced, and the background's been kind of more evened out. We've got a slight reddish tinge over on this side. In fact, if I show you the before and the after, this is where we started, and this is the point we've reached so far. So we do need to do a little bit of further work. So once again, remembering to deselect the image first, the next process is to come up to Photoshop's Magic Wand selection tool, and what this will do, when we click on part of the image, it will select pixels of a certain tone. What I usually do for the sample size, I make it a 5x5 average. That seems to work fairly well. And if we click on where we have this residual gradient, that the Magic Wand tool has selected quite a lot of the image, but ignoring of course the galaxy because this is not part of the selection. So let's see what this does to the image. So the first thing I'll do once again, and I'd always recommend this, is to use Control H again just to hide the marching ants. Now we'll invoke Gradient Xterminator again in exactly the same way, but this time I'm going to change some of the settings. So under Detail I'll now select Fine, and under Aggressiveness I'll select High. But once again we make sure Balance Background Colour is selected. Then we click on OK. Quite a lot of processing going on here, as you can see, but it doesn't take too long usually. Okay, it looks like Gradient Xterminator has done a fairly good job on this image now. The sky background is much more even and neutral across the whole image, which is great. So once again, as before, I'll show you the before and the after. And well, you can see that Gradient Xterminator has done a particularly good job of removing the offending moonlight gradients. We can use one of Photoshop's other tools to fine-tune this image. And I'm going to use Photoshop's Color Range tool, which is accessed under the Select menu and come down to Color Range. And this is the menu that opens. The fuzziness slider dictates how many pixels are selected once we've actually chosen a selection. And by that I mean that if you raise the fuzziness value, if we were to select on a part of the image, it would select quite a wide range of pixels that are similar to our original selection point. If we bring the fuzziness slider right down, it's to something like, let's say around 20 for now, that's absolutely fine. It means that the pixels we click on in the image to select are quite a narrow range, and this is kind of what we want. The other thing to remember is that we'll be taking multiple selections from this image. So to do that we have to click on the middle of these three dropper symbols, the one with the plus sign on, and when we do that we can click within the image and we're actually taking multiple selection points now, and I presume that what Photoshop will do is just do a kind of average of all the selection points that we're choosing. The only thing to really look out for is don't click on any stars or obviously the galaxy either. So I've created a few selection points. Let's just click on OK, and once again you can see the familiar marching ants, and as always we'll use Ctrl H to hide those. Now what we can do, we've actually selected some of the pixels in the image that are causing any remaining light pollution effects, and one method I found that works really well is to call up the hue and saturation menu. You can do it from here, Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, and if there are any remaining offending pixels you can just click on the saturation slider and just drag that over to the left a little bit, and then hopefully what that will do is it should remove any remaining light pollution gradients. It's quite a subtle effect at this point because Gradient Xterminator did a really good job in the first place. So our image is looking fairly neutral. Once again we must remember to deselect, so I'll use Ctrl D for that, and the image is now deselected. And as before, let's have a look at the original image as we opened it compared to what we have on the screen now, and you can see that we've done a fairly good job of neutralizing that background. If you have any remaining colours in the image, one really nice quick fix that you might like to call upon is to just use Photoshop's auto colour button. And you can see what it's done here. Initially it's darkened the image, and that might be more to your liking. The sky background is fairly dark, the galaxy is looking quite good, no shifting colour balance at all. But one thing I would always recommend is, if you're doing any auto settings, is just to check the levels menu as you're going through these processing streams. So for brevity I'll just use Ctrl L to bring up the levels menu, and you can see that actually we haven't got any clipping to speak of. We might wish to just darken the sky background a tad more, but at the moment we're not having to deal with any kind of clipping issues at all, so we just double check that once more. And yep, we've got a little bit of headroom here, that's absolutely fine. The image is looking quite good. We can always just remove that later on if necessary.